All right, it's been a little bit. As you can see, I'm using screen capture technology now to do my recordings. I just thought that it would have been better to do it this way. A lot less cumbersome, and you don't have to see my hands clutter up the screen all the time. So, as we talked about earlier, we were talking about the story and history so much, but really, I got more caught up in the history given the backstory to set up to where the gifted story starts. So, this is where we're talking about the ranks of powers, the Centurion incident, the installation of the Protector Nations. So now let's actually go into the story. Back when I showed you my first video, is we were following a main character. Her name was Sarai, and pretty much her backstory is she is an immigrant. That is living now in the East Coast USA. Remember how I talked about the areas that were destroyed by the Centurion, and I mentioned the East Coast? That's for a reason. So at this point, East Coast, you can imagine, cities like New York and New Jersey, definitely not in their prime. They're actually, a lot of them are in very destroyed conditions, as you can see right here. Pretty much I was trying to get a kind of feel for not the ghetto exactly, but a neighborhood where they realize like there's so much damage that it's almost counterproductive to go and repair things, especially all the repairs that have happened, or all the destruction that has happened. Repairs would be so time consuming and all that it's really, it just really wouldn't be worth it. So Sarai, I have set her backstory to be that she was an immigrant from Egypt with her family. And so she is Egyptian, yes. That's not a very common ethnicity, but that's kind of what I was going for anyway. So she fled Egypt with her parents when Egypt actually became a shadow nation. Remember how we talked about the protector nations and how any nation that doesn't form with them is called a shadow nation? Well, nations can actually drop out of the protector nations as well, and that is the case for Egypt. So Egypt drops out, becomes a shadow nation, but there's still a window that they could have retained their status as a protector nation citizen, and so the parents fled to America, and so that's where she is right now. And so we kind of got the idea of like brick walls, kind of busted down buildings, a lot of abandoned cars, but really technology is the same. You got street lights right there. Let me choose a different color. You got, street lights, very simple, nothing LED. Again, this is like 1990s. Brick walls right there. Oh, geez, that was not narrow. There we go. Brick walls right over there, kind of a fence, broken cars that obviously look like they've been there for a long time. And then I wanted to go into characters. So the story, of course, will begin with Sarai, but it will go over a lot of people. So as of right now, as you can see, there are people that are good and people that are bad. So in this story, a protector, obviously part of the protector nations, is pretty much someone who is licensed and officially able to use their gifts for safety. And safety pretty much means that they are cops. They, like, how a cop can't pull out his gun and shoot someone for the heck of it? That's the exact same thing over here. Is protectors don't just use their powers and abuse them. They only use it when absolutely necessary to protect people. And so you see how their armor kind of looks like a mix between SWAT and soldiers. And that's because, they are... they're pretty much United Nations soldiers at this point. Like they're of course meant to keep the peace, so they're very domestic. But they are definitely heavily defended because the people they're going up against are using their abilities illegally. So that's going to be a big problem. So this guy, his name is Ace. Ace is kind of a big deal. So of all the protectors often can become celebrities. They're famous, because they're known for using their powers for righteous ways. And so people really cling on to that. They become like heroes. But of course the thing is like in this culture, you can't call them heroes. It's like it's a name from a bygone era. So the idea of calling someone a hero is almost like an insult. I mean, I'm pretty sure someone wouldn't be offended that you call him a hero, but you call him such an outdated term. It would be like me walking up to a random stranger and, using really old English, like it's good to see you, thy lord, and stuff like that. It's almost like the language has evolved and changed over time. And so you got Ace, he's a protector, but his history is really interesting. Is before the Protector Nations reformed, you still had regular heroes. And so, as you can imagine, he's wearing a uniform right now. So, like a vigilante, which is who Datahead is, you see how he's just wearing normal clothes and stuff. That's the whole thing. Is just think of like old comic books like Batman. You have a man who feels like it's his duty to help others, and he goes and he does it. And this is, before the Centurion incident. So that's pretty normal, right? They're not sanctioned, of course. They're not paid by the government or anything like that. They're doing it all on their own free will, putting themselves in danger for the betterment of mankind, stuff like that. And so that's where you really get the vigilante dying when the Protector Nations are formed. It's pretty much the idea that vigilantes have all realized that they need to unite and create a better world. And so they follow the Protector Nations, and Ace is one of those vigilantes who leads that charge. Now, of course, as you can see with the character Datahead, there are those who don't and believe that they shouldn't. And of course, it's like the whole idea is like, no matter how good the Protector Nations are, there's always going to be people who think that they need to act out and not live under those restrictions. And so, remember when I talked about like S-rank gifts? Even for protectors, S-rank gifts are very uncommon. Because think about this. You can't really protect someone if your ability is to create earthquakes or destroy buildings. You'd more likely cause more damage. So Ace is the one guy I told you about who has the adrenal gland, or the adrenaline rush. So for him, all he has is he just has a huge boost. So let's say something along the lines that he has like 3 times the adrenaline of a normal person in his body. And he can also activate at will. And that is his power. And yet he is one of the most popular because he's able to protect more people with his power. He doesn't cause collateral damage. He's very smart. He's very careful. He's not this big brute. And that archetype really doesn't work in the hero business. Like, just think about it. If your power was just super strength, you'd actually cause more damage than doing good. And so that's where the whole idea of being creative with your powers really works out. So for him, he's just very sturdy, very tough. But other than that, he's just a man. So he's not going to cause more property damage than a normal person could. And so that's Ace. His backstory, of course, will go into more detail. But now you got Datahead, who's a vigilante. This guy, his backstory is pretty much he's this professor of physics who realizes that his gift is that his brain can visualize on trajectories. So if I were to go into, a little bit of the math that I've learned, especially when it comes to physics, is he can see things and their expected trajectory. And so he see things in like, velocities in like meters per second, or acceleration, which is meters per second squared. He sees all of this going on in like, I'd want to say real time, and I don't know if it would make him a little bit more overpowered if he can slow down time in order for him to use his ability better. So let's say he sees like a gun, right? A guy pointing a gun. He, with his gift, actually sees a lot more than just the gun. He sees the motion of the gun itself, and he sees like the newtons, the forces behind it. But he also sees, trajectories. And so he sees that if the bullet was fired at that moment, he would see the speed of the bullet. So you have like, 5,000 meters per second. And then, but he also sees where it's going to go. So it actually makes him extremely effective in a firefight. So he pretty much uses his smarts to outwit people. And so all of this is just a little like sneak peek of what he can do. And what he can do is so hard to explain. So just imagine that he can just see the physics going on everywhere around him. So like you see the wind blowing. Oh, that's water. Okay, let's say you see the water like crashing up on the shore. He can not only see the amount of force involved in the crash, but the speed as it crashes as well. So he can use this to expertly estimate when things will fall or collide and stuff, and use it to his advantage. So it's a very thought-based skill, almost to the point where you'd consider it a C or a D class because it's so odd, but the way he implements it makes it so very good. And then we have right over here, Knoll, Crime Lord. Like, I didn't do so good in drawing this guy. I intentionally, tried to, shade him out and stuff like that. But pretty much Knoll, as his name suggests, is he can not nullify abilities, but he can remove memories from people. And so what he does is, it comes at a cost. Again, remember when I told you how mind abilities were extremely dangerous and they were considered S rank? This is where Knoll comes in. Is human nature is really determined upon past experiences that define you. So Knoll, early on when he discovered his gift, realized that if he can just erase the things that defined a person, he could change a man. If he wanted to have someone join his team, all he had to do was erase his memories, and he'd be his. And so that's where you get this really dark tone with Knoll. Is you have a man who could really undo everything that you are. But of course, an ability like his would have been a little bit overpowered if I didn't balance it. And so I did. I decided that in order for him to erase a memory, he needs to lose one of his own. And he does have power over what memories he loses. But that means if he wanted to erase a very, very important memory in someone's life, like the memory of their mother, he would have to erase a memory of almost equal importance. And so the plan of erasing people's core memories that define them to turn them to your side is not something he can just use whenever he wants. He has to be so careful. But of course, the reason why his name is Knoll is because he eventually lost enough memories of his own to forget his own name. And so that's where his little cool backstory comes in, is that he doesn't really know his own name, but he's still evil. Like, he still knows that he's evil. And what's really cool about Knoll is he's kind of the dive into the personal characters. Like, is a man born evil, or does he become evil? So it's the classical argument of nature versus nurture. So he believes actually the nurture part, even though he himself is more of a nature. You see, Knoll, no matter how many memories he loses, still is an evil person. But he also believes that as he alters people's memories, it's more of a nurture. So he is actually a cool explanation, of both being true. Is people are born with certain tendencies, and people develop certain tendencies through experiences. And so what's really interesting is the question of, like, would Hitler have been such a bad guy if he had a normal life? That's the cool thing about Knoll, is that he wants to experiment with that. He wants to take heroes and see if he can change them and make them evil if he just removes their memories. And then there's this important character. Oh, I totally forgot. Knoll is a crime lord, and so his crime syndicate is actually really interesting. So I don't want to go into like really, really dark topics, but so in today's age, we all know at least a little bit about human trafficking. We've all watched the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and pretty much instead of human trafficking being used for pleasure, rather when you can identify that a child has a very valuable skill, they immediately become a target. And so the whole idea is they want these S-rank children that manifest these skills early on in life. They abduct them from their parents. And then Knoll erases their memories. So the wonderful thing that Knoll figured out is that children's memories are so malleable. So children actually are what I would call free in his eyes. Is he doesn't need to sacrifice a memory of his to wipe the mind of a child, because the child's minds are so easily controlled anyway. There's no trade-off. He's so skilled that he pays no price. But of course, that's only for children. For adults, on the other hand, it's very difficult. So the idea to change one adult would have a major cost. Just one adult would have such a great cost to Knoll's psyche that he almost only works in children. And so that's the whole idea, is they find S-ranked children, they abduct them, erase their memories, and then they sell them to the highest bidder. So rather than them becoming like objects of men's fantasies and stuff like that, they become weapons. So they become weaponized children. And this is a very, very dark part of the story when Knoll gets involved. It is when you realize that if you erase the minds of children, you can weaponize them, right? So, sorry about that, is now we go into Godfrey. So Godfrey's this up-and-coming politician who has no gifts. So that's another thing that I thought was interesting, is how would people without gifts work in this world? So you have people without gifts that have no opinion, right? Well, he has a strong opinion against gifts. So he's strongly against the use of gifts. And, of course, almost everyone is. Because of the Centurion incident, society is very scarred. Like, everyone doesn't see gifts as like this, this wonderful thing. Most of them are scared of it already. So if you think about it, him being against gifts because of its destructive potential is like an analogy for gun control. And now, I don't want to get too political in talking about my own views, but I do want to show the arguments going on. Is he's strongly against it. The only problem with this against gun control is everyone's born with gifts. People aren't born with guns. And so that's really where Godfrey comes in, is what does he want to do? Like, he is against it, but it's not like he can take everyone's gifts away, as far as we know, right? And as the story develops, I do actually want the plot to revolve around the concept of what if it is possible that you can permanently take a gift away. And so that's the big question, is can you take it away? Can you suppress it? Can you limit it? And that's where he comes in, is he really makes the argument in the side of we don't need gifts. Gifts aren't necessary and stuff like that. And he makes good points, because in this society, they've seen the destructive potential. But again, the question will be asked, well, do you think that his policies would have been able to stop the Centurion? That's a really hard question. Maybe it could have been a preventative measure. And so that's where he also comes in, is he's talking about preventative measures. The whole idea of the concept of an S-ranked person. So let's say you have a child and they become S-rank, right? They're discovered to have a power that's so dangerous that it's like, what do you do with it? He wants S-ranks to be taken away from their families and pretty much put into compounds. So again, we're seeing like the extremist things, is you can't take the S rank away from the child. So all you can do is really take the child away from the families and put them into safe and secure compounds. So he shows a lot of the conflict in the world, and he's a major political player, especially as things start to unravel. And so to keep this video short, I just wanted to go over these 4 characters. I didn't really go over Sarai that much because she develops as the story is. These guys are already established. And yes, I kind of didn't go into Datahead too much, or Ace. I went into Godfrey and Knoll a little bit more. But that's because they'll be developed further as the story progresses, as they interact. So let me know how this video goes, and if I should keep doing the screen record. So, yeah.